Welcome to Essential Procedural Modeling. Procedural workflows with geometry can be thought of ways that we might build geometry based on a set of rules, and SOPs are a great way for us to experiment with this. Let's get started by opening up the OpCreate dialog and adding a rectangle and a line SOP here into our network. Now with these two operators, we can start to build something interesting right away. Let's begin by adding a sweep SOP here into the network. And let's connect our rectangle to our first input and our line to the second input. Now what we're going to start to see is that we're going to have a rectangle for each one of the points that we have on our line. To better see that, let's go ahead and make our line SOP viewer active. Let's right click and select display options, and let's turn on our points. And we can see that we have 2 points here on our line. If we were to say turn up the number of points, something like 10, we'll see that we in turn now have 10 little rectangles here that correspond to our points. Now let's make our rectangle a little bit smaller. I'm going to middle mouse click right here on size. I'm going to hold down the middle mouse button and drag all the way down to say 0.1. And we can already begin to see how this idea of a procedural workflow allows us to combine operators together based on the parameters or based on the rules that govern our operators. Let's head back to our sweep, and this time let's do something like turn on the skin, and let's turn on a little bit of twist, right? If we turn this to maybe like 5, we'll see that if we hit the W key to turn on the wireframe, that we already have a little bit of twist in here. So that's already interesting. Now I could come back to my line and I might push this all the way out to say like 5. And this is great. I have something that I kind of like here that's moving in an interesting direction. But what I'd really like to do is build a little more shape and curve here to my actual line. So let's pull our sweep over here to the right. And this time let's right click on the operator wire and select insert operator. And I'm going to select chop 2. So I'm going to grab a chop 2 SOP and add that to my network. The pattern chop is a great way that we can build interesting curves. So let's go ahead and open up the OpCreate dialog, head over to our chop family, and add a pattern chop here into our network. Now, I always like to end my networks before I transition to another operator with a null. So let's right click on the output of our pattern. Let's add a null chop here into our network. And now we can middle mouse click on our chop 2. We can see that this error that we're getting, why it's red, is that it doesn't have a chop, invalid chop input. So let's drag our null on top of our chop 2 and let go. And now we can see here on our chop 2 that we still have a warning, but that big scary red kind of X has gone away. Let's middle mouse click again to see what might be happening. So our channel txtytz isn't found. So we have some defaults here that we can go ahead and get rid of. Let's clear out our channel scope and our attribute scope. And what we're going to do is we're going to convert a set of channels and samples and then apply that to a set of properties for our points, or a set of attributes for our points. So over here in our channel scope, let's click our little right drop down, and we're going to select Chan 1, and we're going to take the values that are inside of all of the samples for Chan 1, and here in our attribute scope, we're going to apply that to the point position for our SOP. Now, not very much looks like it's changed here, so let's do a little more digging. If we middle mouse button click on our chop 2, we'll see that we have 10 points. And if we middle mouse click on our null, we'll see that we have 1,000 samples. So we've got a mismatch between the number of points and the number of samples. So let's see if we can fix that. Let's head back to our line SOP. And now I'm going to hold down the left mouse button and I'm going to drag this parameter over here to my pattern chop. And I'm going to drop it right here on the parameter called length. So now I'm going to release the left mouse button and I'm going to select bind. Binding allows us to create a relationship between two operators so that when we change one, it in turn changes the other. So I could turn this up to 500 here. So 500 samples, and if I go back to the line SOP, I'll see that I have 500 points. Or I could change this to be 250 points. If I come back to my pattern chop, I'll see it's updated here. And that's great. And in fact, I'm starting to see more of the shape that I wanted to begin with. So I've got this nice kind of sine shape. If we take a look over here at our sweep, I'm going to hit the H key to home. We also have a nice kind of fun braided twisted shape here. And this opens up lots of opportunities for us to start to manipulate our pattern chop and see the results here in our geometry. We might turn up the number of cycles, for example, or turn down the taper, and we've started to create a really interesting kind of geometry here. Let's make a few other changes. I'm going to go ahead and right click on the output and select convert. I'm going to convert the result from my sweep SOP here to a polygon. That's the default. Next, I'm going to right click one more time and select facet. On my facet SOP, I'm going to go ahead and turn on unique points and compute normals. And now I've got something so like a little more interesting looking in terms of the way that it's shaded. Now I want to do one more trick here. So let's go ahead and let's add a transform SOP. Let's go ahead and see if we can rotate that here, I think on the Z axis by -90. Actually, let's do that on the Y axis. Excellent. Love that. And let's add a copy SOP here into our network. We're going to connect our transform to the first input, and let's add a sphere SOP here into our network. And let's first change our primitive type to polygon and turn our detail down to say just 1. Now let's connect that. And now what we'll see is that we have a copy of our first input at each of the vertices of our second input. Let's get back to our sphere and let's head to the sphere page. I'm going to hold down the middle mouse button on radius and drag this up to just make this a little bit larger. And we can start to see that already now we have changes that are made all the way back at the very beginning part of our network. If we were to change our pattern and maybe turn down the number of cycles to just 2, that's going to have an impact on the resulting geometry that we've built. And in fact, if we take our sphere and we turn up the detail, maybe to 4, that now we've got a whole lot of crazy geometry to work with. This is just the beginning of how we can start to think of working with procedural workflows with SOPs, and hopefully this gives you some interesting ideas for what you might create.